Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, mgrahamsews. This video tutorial is for the Dior Book Tote Inspired Bag by Tobistylx Bag Pattern. This bag is a really quick sew, so if you're looking to build up your stock for craft markets or maybe a last minute gift, this is a great bag for that. So let's discuss some of the features of this bag. First, there is binding on the exterior. Normally we do binding on the interior, but the binding is on the exterior, and Toby walks you through it all so that you get really beautiful binding on the exterior of your bag. You'll also notice I have webbing going across the front at the center, and that's a really nice feature. You don't have to add it if you don't have anything to add in the center. You can just leave this plain or maybe do some embroidery, a panel. Just get really creative and have fun with this because it does have all this extra space to really get creative with. But I like how it looks, and it goes all the way around the bag. The other thing is this pretty bow on the front, which Toby again shows you how to make it. And once you know how to make this, you'll be able to add this to any other bag if you just want that little bit of extra decoration. When we open the bag, there's a magnetic snap that keeps it closed. And then you'll see that there's this slip pocket on the one side. So perfect for anything you want to put in there that you don't want at the bottom of the bag. Now, there is no other pockets in the bag, so if you want, you can definitely add another slip pocket, or if you know how to add a zipper pocket, you can add a zipper pocket here. You can make this your own, but it's nice and wide, so you'll be able to fit a whole lot inside there. It's a great on-the-go bag, great for a bag for a night out, somewhere fancy that you have to go. You could make this in any materials. You can change up the bow as well. You could just have a whole lot of fun with this. The handles have this water tubing inside, which makes them stiff and nice and strong, and that's why they stand up. I really like how they look and how they stay standing up and gives that nice shape, the rounded shape that they have. It's a really fun make, and like I said, it's a really quick sew. I was really shocked at how fast this came together. So this is the Dior Book Tote Inspired Bag, and I'm going to walk you through how to make it. So let's get started. As always, the very first thing you're going to want to do is read through the entire pattern. This is because oftentimes designers give information regarding different materials being used or maybe different interfacings being used. So you'll want to make note of that before you begin cutting out your material. Also, it's important so you can familiarize yourself with the pattern before we start constructing the bag. Once you've read through the entire pattern, you're ready to start cutting out your pattern pieces. I've already cut all mine out, and I'm using a soft vinyl, which as you can see is very squishy. I can scrunch it right up, so it's sort of similar to an interfaced quilting cotton. I've also attached the interfacing already, and I'm using the same interfacing as given in the pattern, so that is on the bottom of my gusset here. I'm also using a waterproof canvas for my lining, so there is no interfacing needed on this. So again, if you're using quilting cotton, that's where you will need to interface. But if you're using canvas like I am, you won't need to interface it. And then I'm using a quilting cotton for my little scarf panel, so the little tie that's going to go around the handle of the bag. Because I've read through the pattern, I've already made some marks that are needed. So I've marked my center points on all my pattern pieces. So you can see here I've marked my center points. And I've written on the back with a piece of tape what the pattern piece is, and also any marks that I need to make for measurements. So for example, on my lining panel here, you can see in white, I made a mark for where my slip pocket is going to need to go. And I've also marked my gusset and my exteriors for where we're going to put the little belt or webbing across the front and sides of them. And any other center points that I've needed to make, I have made all those marks. And that's just because it makes it a little bit faster for me when we get to that point in the pattern. I don't have to stop the camera because I don't show any measurements. So no rulers, no pattern pieces, no cutting mats, nothing are shown on my table. And that's for the protection of the designer, but also because I often film during testing, and that means that things can sometimes change. So if a measurement changes, then that doesn't affect my tutorial. My tutorial just stays the same. So you will need to have your pattern open beside you, or either on another device or on the device you're watching this tutorial on, so you can follow along, because even things like seam allowances, I don't even give those. Another thing, this is filmed like a sew along, so there are no parts that I'm going to fast forward through, even when I'm sewing on my machine. You can always speed this up in YouTube if you want, or just fast forward past that part that you don't want to watch, or even just watch the parts that you just need to see. Say you're stuck on something and you just want to make sure that you're doing it right. use this tutorial how you see fit. That's what it's there for, to help you. So the only time I won't show everything on camera is when there's things that we have to do that are double. So for example, the handle, I'll show you it on camera and then I'll go off and sew the other handle. And that's just to help with the length of the tutorial, because they can get really long. And if I'm showing you everything 2 or 3, 4 times when it's really not needed, then that just makes it that much longer. But everything else you will see on camera. So if there's anything that you don't want to see, just fast forward through it. Use the tutorial how you see fit. So once you have all your pattern pieces cut and you have everything marked up that you need to have marked up, we're ready to get started. And the very first thing we're going to need is our belt or webbing. So that's what's going across the front of your bag and on your gusset. So you'll need your front pattern pieces, so the main panels and your gussets. So I'm just going to push this off to the side, and we'll start with one main panel. So this piece right here. And what I did before I marked my little line, because you can see I've got a line that goes across there, I marked where the top is because this is the top. So we're measuring to make this line from the top down. And I didn't want to turn this and have this ending up being upside down so that my belt and webbing won't line up when the bag is finished. So I made sure to mark a T so I can know where I marked down from. And to just make sure that that didn't change, yeah, I did do it right. So again, you may want to place a little T at the top so you know where the top is, so you don't get these all turned around and not sewn properly. So the very first thing you're going to do is take one of your longer pieces of your belt or webbing and you're going to lay it across the front of your main panel, and you're going to line up the top of your belt webbing with the line that you made, just like that. Now you can use some double-sided tape if you want to hold it in place, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to place it in the center of this webbing here. If you don't have anything that you can place across the centers of these panels, you can definitely omit this part, or if you just want a more simple bag and you don't want to have all the extra details, definitely just skip this part. You can still make the bag without having this. So again, I'm lining this up with the line I made. So the top edge of my webbing is going with that line I made. And I've just placed it down just like that. And now I'm going to sew the 2 straight long edges of the webbing using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Oh, something happened here. Hang on. I got some nesting. I think there's a thread stuck in where my bobbin is. So let me just fix that. Sometimes our machines like to have little fits on us. Not a good way to start. All right, let's try that again. So I'm going to sew this with the seam allowance all the way across both the long edges. Sorry about that. And I'm going to increase my stitch length, not to quite my top stitch length, and not quite the length that I use, sort of in between the length I use for sewing a bag together and top stitching. Trim all your threads. And this one. Trim all your threads so that it looks like that. So from the top down. Now I'm going to show you the gusset and then I'll go and finish attaching the rest of them. The gusset, you're measuring from one short edge from the top of that short edge down, and that's where you're measuring. And you're doing the exact same thing. You're placing your webbing at that line so the top of the webbing lines up with the line which is right there. I don't know if you can see that on camera. I think you can. So I'm lining it up with that line. So the top edge of my webbing is lined up with that line, and then I'm going to tape that down again, and then I'm going to sew it just as I did for this panel. So I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to attach the webbing to the rest of the panels that need it, and then we'll come back and we will continue on. So there we have it. I've attached all my belt and webbing to my pattern pieces. So I'm using webbing. You can use a belt or anything that you have that you want to put across. Even some ribbon would look really pretty if you have some pretty ribbon to put across. You can make this into a bag for any occasion too. So any special occasion that you want to make it for. So there it is. I have it all attached. So I'm going to put these to the side for now. We're going to move on to creating our slip pocket, and for that we need one of our main lining panels and our slip pocket piece and then our slip pocket trim. So put the main lining and the slip pocket trim to the side for now. We're going to start with the slip pocket. And what we need to do with this is we're going to fold this in half. So that won't get off my finger. Fold this in half so it is right sides together. So right now you have it looking up at you. So the right side is facing up. We're going to fold it in half so the short edges meet. Pin it together. And then pin the sides. And we're going to sew just the side edges right now, not the top edge. So we're going to sew just these two side edges here. And that's it. So you'll sew those using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And if you've changed your stitch length, don't forget to put it back to the length you use when sewing a bag. All right, so trim all your threads. I forgot one. Then what we're going to do is trim these corners here so that we remove the bulk for when we turn the bag or the pocket right side out. Be careful not to slip or snip where the stitches are. You don't want to cut those. If you do accidentally cut them, don't panic. What you can do is just go back over and re-stitch that. Stitch starting on right here back at the end. Back stitch over your previous stitches and stitch all the way again and back stitch. And what that back stitching here does is it locks in the previous stitches so they don't come undone, and then you've restitched that whole area. So I'm going to grab my turning tool. We're going to turn this so it is right sides out. And I'm just pressing that with my tool. Now you can take this to your iron and give it a really good press. I'm just going to put some clips on it for now. If you're using a quilting cotton, you can press it with your iron. I can press with the canvas, but I'm kind of being lazy and don't want to get up and do it. So I've just got the clips on the side edges, which work just as well. So just like that, you can take it to your iron again and press it. So then we're going to base stitch that top edge together, just so that it doesn't shift on us. And if you want, you can use a longer stitch length here because this stitching is just to hold that closed and it's not going to be seen in the final bag. Trim all your threads. So just like that. So we've just basted that edge together. Now you need to take your pocket trim and you need to draw a line directly down the center of the trim. Once you have that done, go ahead and place some double-sided tape under the line. So under 1/2 of the line. So under here, I'll show you when I get it done. Oh no. Something happened. It folded over onto itself. All right. Now it's sticking to me. And if you're ever wondering what I'm doing, I know I've mentioned this in previous videos, but what I do is I take the end of my double-sided tape and I just fold it back onto itself I peel the paper backing back, and what that does is it creates a little tab here on the end with no tape, making it easier to pull this backing off when I get it pressed down. So press the paper back, press the double-sided tape down, then pull the backing of the paper. Of course, it's sticking to my nails. Then we're going to line up our slip pocket with that center mark, but not right on the center mark. You want it just a smidge down from the center mark. And the reason for this is because this does have a bit of a bulk here. So if you put it right on the center line, when you fold the slip pocket trim in half, it's not going to meet directly together. So having it just a smidge below is what you want. Except for don't do what I just did, which was had it crooked. So just a smidge, so there's my line, and it's just a smidge below my line. So when I fold this over now, what's going to happen is it's going to have both the edges of the slip pocket trim line up, and that's what you want. So we'll place another piece of double-sided tape across the edge of the trim, and this time I'm just going to go up a little bit higher. Pull the paper backing off, and then line up the edges. And your trim is bigger, and that's okay. We're going to trim it down. So just fold this in half right over top of your pocket. So just like that. So we folded it in half right over top of the pocket. Now we're going to top stitch this down from the raw edge. So you're top stitching from this raw edge over. So we'll top stitch that down. Cut your threads. And it looks like that when it's top stitched. Now we're going to trim these so they are even. So you're going to trim these little ends off here. Be careful not to cut your slip pocket. You just want to trim the slip pocket trim. So what I do is I just follow the side edge of the slip pocket. Just like that. And that's why we have to use the raw edge material here, because you have the raw edges here, and then you have the raw edges on the side. And that's how your pocket trim will be. And if you look from the side edge, you can see that mine lines up on both sides. Now we need to take this and attach it to our lining main panel. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there's a mark you need to make from the top edge down, and you can see it there. So you'll want to refer to the pattern for the measurement. So from the top edge down, and we need to have the center too. So to find the center point, what I do is just fold my panel in half. And then I already have my center marks here, so I don't need to worry about doing that. And then fold my slip pocket in half. And then I'm going to line up the pocket, so the slip pocket trim, the very top of it, with the line I made, and then the center mark on the slip pocket trim with the center mark that I have on my panel from the creases that I made. So the two center creases are lined up, and the top of my trim is lined up with this line here. So here's my line right here, and I'm going to line the top edge of my slip pocket trim with that, and then my two creases line up. So that makes this pocket centered and positioned exactly where Toby has us put it in the pattern. I'm pinning this in place. And when I go to sew these side edges, I'll remove the clips as I go. Right now what the clips are doing is they're just holding those seams flat for me. All right, so now we're going to sew down one side edge, across the bottom, and up the other side edge. And don't forget to backstitch at start and stop. You really want to make sure you lock that in, because there is a lot of stress at tops of pockets. So I like to backstitch a couple times. Now remember, in other videos you may have heard me mention corners. Sometimes we get angled stitches. The way to prevent that is to put your stitch length to 0, take one stitch, return your stitch length back to the length you were using, turn the corner, and then continue stitching until you reach the other corner. And then you'll just repeat that at the other corner. All that does is it locks in that one stitch at the corner so that it doesn't go on an angle. And if you turn the corner before you remember to take that one stitch, that's okay. As long as you didn't start stitching, you can still take that one stitch. And there we have it. Our pocket is now attached. We have a little slip pocket in our bag. Now we're going to move on to making our rolled handles. So grab your handle panels. Just trying to find them. That's these two here. Remove that. And what you need to do with these is you need to draw a line down the entire length of the pattern piece in the center. So on the center all the way down on both pieces, you will put a line down it. Then what you're going to do is taking some double-sided tape. You can do what I'm doing and use a thicker one or place double-sided tape on either side of the line. You're going to fold those long edges, the raw long edges, in to meet the center line. I'm not going to fold them though so that they touch in the center. I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap between, and that's again because when we go to fold it, it's going to have some bulk. So the same thing like when we did the slip pocket, there's a little bit of bulk, and when you fold it over in half, it won't fold or it won't look as nice because you'll have the bulk here in your center. I hope that makes sense. So fold it. So it's just a little bit under the line, not much. You just want a little space between the two long edges. And somehow I'm going all crooked here. So there's one long edge done. Now I'm going to fold the other long edge. And you can see, I'll show you, you'll see that I left just a little bit of a gap. Not a very big one, just a little one. And you can see how there's a little bit of a gap there? That's all I left. And that's so that when I fold this over, there's not this extra bulk in this middle section here, and it has room to fold and be nice and crisp when it's folded over. Now we're going to bring the long folded edges to meet. So you're going to fold this in half again, and you can use some clips to help hold it in place. And then we're going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. So we're going to sew this long clipped edge here with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Whoops. And don't forget to backstitch at start and stop. That's always very important. Clip all your threads. Now what we're going to do is we're going to push some of our tubing that we have. through the open end here, because we didn't sew across the short edges, we have to push it through this opening here. So if you push it apart, we're pushing it in the center of the handle. Now, this may take you a little bit of time, but just take your time and keep pushing it through. So you're going between the two layers. So basically in the center. So remember how we had it folded both edges in, and then it folds like this? You're getting it between these two layers here. And this may, again, be a little bit harder to do. It's hard for my hands to really push this through, and depending on the material you're using too. There we go, getting it. I just have to really get a firm grip on it. Once I get a good firm grip on it, I'm able to push it through. Not as easy as it looks like it will be. Like I have just this little bit here left to go, and I can't, it just doesn't want to go. So once you get this pushed through, there needs to be an amount at each end, from each end, that it needs to not be in. So you want to make sure it's even in the center, but then you have the ends here that don't have it. So both ends, there's a measurement given in the pattern for how far away from the ends this needs to be. So I'm going to go off camera, continue fishing this through. I'll make my second handle, and I'll come back and I'll show you how it looks when I'm done. So I was able to get the tubing in, and I found an easier way to be able to get it in than what I was doing. What I did was I just sort of pushed on here. So I'll just show you. I pushed, and it kind of bunched it up here in the center, and then I just smoothed it out, and that's how I got it through, and did that so that I could get it even on both sides. And as you'll see, there is no tubing here. So on the ends, both ends, there's no tubing in there. This is where the tubing stops. And that's what you want. You want it to stop on both those ends there. So you can see here where I'm folding it down, there's no tubing there. And that's on both the handles. And that was really easy, much easier than the way I was trying to do it. So the next thing we have to do is attach our interfacing to our main panels, because we haven't done that yet. So grab your main panels, take them to your iron, and attach your interfacing to the back. And there is a measurement for where it needs to be placed, so you'll want to pay attention to that, and fuse it in place. Once we have that done, we'll come back and we will continue with finishing our bag. So I've attached my interfacing to my main panels following the instructions given in the pattern, and it looks like that. I've also allowed it to cool, and the reason for that is that ensures that it's totally fused, because sometimes if we take this after we fuse the interfacing and start moving it around, what happens is it's not completely fused because it hasn't cooled. So that'll make the interfacing lift up or off the panel you have it fused to, and it can also cause bubbling as well. So I just leave it until it's completely cooled before I start moving it around, and that ensures that it's fused in place. So that's how it looks. Now we need to take our lining main panel and we need to place it so it is wrong sides together. So your exterior panel is wrong sides up, then your lining panel goes on top, right sides up. And we're lining up the bottom edge all the way across, and then the side edges. And what we're going to do is we're going to use some double-sided tape to help hold this in place. And it's going to be lined up at the bottom edge, and you're going to notice there is some of your exterior panel at the top here that's exposed, but don't worry because we're going to be taking care of that. So take your double-sided tape, place it on the edges, and if you don't have double-sided tape, what you can do is you can actually just baste this all the way around instead of using double-sided tape, or you can use glue if you're using material that you can glue. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'll do it exactly how Toby has given in the instructions. So double-sided tape all the way around. And then I'm going to line up the bottom edges and the bottom corners and the side edges. I'm going to line it all the way up and my side edges, pressing it in place. Just like that. So we have it like that. Then I'm going to leave this one and I'm going to do that off camera because I know I'm going to need to go off camera in just a moment because I need to make a measurement. Now we need to fold this top edge of the main panel to meet the lining. So you're going to fold it down just like that and it's going to meet the top edge of the lining just like that. So fold it all the way down to meet the top edge of your lining. So there's your lining and we're folding it down to meet the top edge. So I'm going to place some double-sided tape along that top edge. And I'm going to fold this top edge down to meet the lining. And you can check too to make sure that it's the same height. So in case something shifted on you and everything is good. So now with this same panel, we're going to place our magnetic snap. So you need to flip it over to the right side. And this may seem a little bit weird to you because we're doing it from the right side. Normally you would want to install it on the wrong side. But after, it's because we fold this edge down after. So what we're going to do is there's a measurement you need to make from the top edge down, so from the top where the fold is down and centered. So I'm going to go off camera because I couldn't do that before we started, and I'm going to make that mark, and I'm also going to attach my lining here and fold that down as well, and then we will continue on. And and also make the mark for the other half of the snap. So both these pieces need a mark from the top edge down and centered for where we're going to place our magnetic snap. So I'm going to make that mark, attach this lining, fold the top edge down, and make the mark on this one too. And then I'll come back and we'll install our snaps. Okay, so I folded that top edge down and I also made that mark and attached the remaining lining panel to my exterior panel. And I installed 1/2 of my magnetic snap already, so that I can go ahead and make some marks that I needed to make. And I did that on this too. So I worked a little bit ahead because I don't want to have to stop again so that we can keep going. So I've made some marks that I already need to make in the later steps. So one of my snaps is already attached, 1/2. I'm going to attach the second one here on camera with you. So what I like to do is take the washer and use it where that mark is and center it. So line it up with the center. Make your mark with your washer for the slits. And if you're using a quilting cotton here, you'll want to add some fray stop or fray check to stop it from fraying. Make your slits. Then push the washer through and remember, or the magnetic snap, sorry. And remember, the magnetic snap piece is going to be on the right side of your material and the washer is on the lining side. So magnetic snap on the exterior side, washer on the lining side. Push it down, close it all up. Just trying to flatten this out a bit. It's kind of got a bubble. There we go. See if that one's done the same way. Oops. That's nice and flat. There we go. So there they are. They're now attached. So when we go to close the bag, it'll be the magnetic snaps that'll close it. And it's on both sides. Now you need to make a mark that is on the lining panel down from this top edge down. So once you have both those magnetic snaps installed on both the panels, and again, you can see that the magnetic snap half is on my exterior at this point, you're going to turn it to the lining side and make a mark down from this top folded edge down. And you can see my line there that I've already made. We're going to fold this top edge where the magnetic snap is down and over to meet that line. So you'll want to use something like a chalk pen or something that you can erase that you won't see when the bag is finished. So add some double-sided tape, and I'm just adding it above this line. I'm going to put it on both panels right now. Now we're going to need to peel it back a little bit as well. So I'm only going to press it down in the center and on the side edges. And it'll make sense in a minute because we need to slip in our handles into this edge here. So I'm just pressing it down right now where the center is and the side edges. And I am using a little bit of a bigger snap than Toby gives in the pattern. So your snap will fit a little bit smaller. It's just because that's the only snaps I had in this antique bronze. So I'm going to have to switch to my zipper foot when I sew to be able to get really close here to that magnetic snap. So now we need to make a mark that is over from the side edge, and you can see my mark here. Hang on, I'm going to try to position this. I don't know if, oh yeah, you can see it there. You can see the marks right here and right here. So over from the side edges, and that's where your handle is going to be placed. So you're going to place the handle at that mark and push it up into the panel between the layers so that it goes right to this top edge here. Now, when I carry my bag, I like these to be pointing towards the inside of the bag, the folded edges. I was trying to think of the word. So you know that when the bag is carried, it's going to look like this when the handle's attached when it comes up. But I want this nice rounded edge to be facing out. So I will put this in so that these handles go like this, and I'm placing it in so that the folded edge is into the center when the bag is closed. Sorry, I don't know if I'm making sense, but I like these to be touching in the middle so that if the bag is sitting out somewhere, you don't see it like this, where you don't see these folded edges facing out. They face in together when the bag is closed. So that's what I mean. I need to place this so that it is like this, so that those folded edges meet in the center. Push it up into the center fold there. So see how my folded edge is here along the center, making sure that the handle is not twisted, and I'm putting this one in, lining it up with that line. And then push the double-sided tape down, and you'll see how the handle, can you see that the rolled edge faces out, and then that edge that has the folded edges face to the inside of the bag. And that's what I want. That's how I like it. That's just a personal preference. You don't have to do that. So I'm just going to add some clips just to really make sure it stays held in place for now. And I'm going to repeat that for the other side. So push the handle up to meet that fold. I'm going to leave that clip for now. And then making sure my handle isn't twisted, I'm bringing it around to the other side. And the double-sided tape that we've placed will help hold the handle as well. So not only do you have the clip holding it, you have the double-sided tape also holding it down. And I can see I need to shift this over a little bit. There we go. So just like that. And again, my seam here faces inside towards the lining. So when I'm carrying the bag, they're in towards the lining, and you see the nice rolled edge on the exterior when the bag is complete. Now, on the wrong side, we need to sew from this bottom edge all the way across this bottom edge on the wrong side. So you're going to really want to take your time to really sew that down and take your time so it's nice and straight. And as I mentioned, I need to switch to a zipper foot here so that I can get really close without hitting my magnetic snap. And I don't remember, yeah, this is the way I sew. I always forget which way I go, or when I'm using these, which ones I need to use, because you have a left and a right. So now I'm going to top stitch this. And again, you're using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And I'm just able to squeeze right past my magnetic snap. And that's how it looks when it's attached. So I'll stitch the other one in place. That zipper foot really helps make that so that you can get right past that magnetic snap. So if your magnetic snap is a little bit bigger, you'll definitely want to do what I did, which is switch to your zipper foot. And I'm just going to hand crank here so I don't, because it's kind of forcing my magnetic snap to lift up right now. Just wanted to make sure that I didn't accidentally hit it. There we go. Beautiful. The other thing too is you can use a thread that blends. So if you have to veer past your magnetic snap, you won't notice it quite as much. But I was able to get past it with my zipper foot. So I'm going to put back on my regular foot. All right, moving right along. Now we need to take the handles and flip them up and then add some rivets to help hold the handles like this. So I do need to go off camera. So I'm going to do that to add my rivets, because you don't need to sit and watch me do that on camera. If you don't have rivets, you can use Chicago screws. If you don't have either of those, what you could do is flip them up and sew across and sew a little box. So come up as close as you can get to where the what's this called? Tubing is, sorry. You can sew as close as you can, come back down, and then make an X. An X will add a little bit of a design on the front of your bag as well. But that's something you can do if you don't have the rivets or Chicago screws to be able to push that up. But you want these to stay standing up. So I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to do that, install my rivets, and then I'll come back and we will continue on. Oh, and before we do continue on, you can also attach your interfacing to your gusset if you haven't already. I did it at the beginning, and that was just a personal choice, and I like it because it also stitched through when I added my webbing to the gusset here. So if you haven't already, go ahead and attach that interfacing as well, and then we'll be able to move on when we're done with adding our rivets and everything. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll continue on once I have my rivets attached. So now that we've installed those rivets, or maybe you've sewn or used Chicago screws, the choice is yours depending on what you have. That is how it'll look on both the panels with the rivets attached. So I'm just going to place those to the side, and I love how the handles stand up. I just think it's a really neat little idea so that your handles are always up, and you can hook it on your arm too. Now grab your gusset with the interfacing attached. You need to attach your lining panel again to your exterior. So same thing we did with the main panels. So the lining and exterior main panels, we need to do the exact same thing here. So what I'm going to do is, again, double-sided tape along the short edges. And then I'm going to place it along the long edges. And you can definitely just sew this if you would prefer, or use some glue. A glue stick is really good for this if you're using materials that you can press with your iron, because what you can do with the glue stick after you've used it is use your iron to dry the glue, and that way there you don't have to wait for it to dry before you start sewing because you don't want to gum up your needle. They do sell stuff too that helps for keeping the residue off your needles. I have it and I keep forgetting to put it on my needle every time I change my needle. But I don't typically really have an issue with residue from double-sided tape on my needle. I just haven't had any of those issues, so I guess that's why I never remember to put it on. But they do sell it, and I get mine from Wawak, but I know there's other companies that sell it as well. I think I bought mine quite a while back and I still haven't opened it. This is what it looks like. I'll just show you, and that'll help. It's a thread lubricant, so it's great for thread, but it also is great on your needle just to help keep it lubricated so that it doesn't get stuck on the adhesive from the double-sided tape or your glue. So now we're lining this up, so you're centering this, and it has to be from the short edges. There's a measurement that you need to use from the short edges of the gusset. And I'm just trying to get this all lined up. So from the short edges of the gusset, they will line up at that mark that you made. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky because I want to keep my long edges aligned as well. It's always hard when there's double-sided tape because it wants to stick to everything before you actually get it to stick in place. So as you can see, it's kind of shifted over a bit, so I have to pull it up and move it over here just so that it stays nice and centered and all lined up. So just maneuver it around just like that. Make sure it's centered. And the other thing I'm going to do is remark where my center points are. So I'm going to peel this back because I want my center points marked, so that I know where they are, because we will need this later, and I'm just marking it within my seam allowance. There we go. So it's nice and flat, and you can even take this to your iron and press it too to really help press it and make it nice and flat and crisp. But it's measured from the ends here and over. There we go. Now, there is a line you need to draw from the edge here. So from this short edge here, sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing. From the short edge, there's a mark you need to make. There's two of them. So one mark and then the second mark. And my first mark lines up with the top edge of my lining. And then the second mark, I already made it. I don't know if you can kind of see it just a little bit. So I made that second mark already. And we're doing the same thing we did with the main panels. We're folding this down to meet the top edge of that lining. So fold it down, and then we'll fold it down again. This will conceal all the raw edges. So using my double-sided tape, I'm going to fold it down and then fold it down again. So folding it twice. Just using those marks that you made. So it's folded down to meet that first line, and now I'm folding it down to meet that second line. So just like that. So repeat that on this side. So again, double-sided tape on the long edge, or the short edge, sorry, the first. And then just above that second line I made. So I'll show you, I'll come closer so you can see. So at the top edge here I put some, and then here's my line here under here, and this is just above the top line, or that line there. So remove the backing, fold this top edge down to that line you made, which falls just above where my lining is, and then remove this paper backing, and we're going to fold this folded edge here to meet that second line we drew. Just like that. And if you fold these together, they should be folded the exact same, and they are. Now we need to top stitch from this folded edge here, this bottom folded edge, along that edge using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Every time my scissors get put back on, sometimes they hit my hand wheel and it makes a funny noise, and I always worry that something's wrong with my machine because they're rubbing on the hand wheel. All right, so I'm just top stitching across, and I'll show you how it looks. Just trimming all my threads. So that's how it looks. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can see it. So I've top stitched that. So that's stuck down now. Now it won't move on us. Now we're going to assemble the bag. So we're going to take one of our main panels and our gusset panel, and we're going to clip it all the way around. Now you're clipping it so they are wrong sides together, because this is going to be bound on the exterior of the bag. So what you want to do is take those center marks. So you have a center mark on the bottom of your lining. So I just need to pull my lining back so I can see where that center mark is and transfer it to the front of my bag. I guess it's not there. I'm going to have to do this. Oh, it is there. It's just a fold. So on the lining, so we're going to line up the center marks. Just want to fix this because I pulled it back a bit, so now it's not smooth. So now we're going to take the center mark on the main panels, and we're going to clip it in place with the center mark on the gusset panel. And remember, we're not putting them so that the binding is going to be on the lining. Right now they are going lining sides together because that binding is going to be on the exterior of the bag. It's a little bit different than what we're used to. Clip the top edges and make sure your folds here at the top, so these two edges here where the bottom of the folds are, all line up and your top edge lines up. So pay special attention to that area. Add some clips. Do that on the other side. You want everything to look like it was going all the way through smoothly. Line up your webbing or your belt, whatever you've put on the side. Make sure they line up. So see how I'm lining those two up here? So this is lining up with this side. Make sure it all lines up. You want it to be all smooth, one straight line. And clip it all the way around. Keep clipping it. Just like that. So right now it looks like this. On the inside and your outside has the raw edges, and that's what you want. Now we need to sew this using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And what I'm going to do down here is I'm actually going to snip this so it opens up. I'm going to make a small snip right in the corner. So it helps open this up right in the corner here so that I can sew this. Can't get the corner. There we go. So that I can sew this corner right down to the corner, and that just opens it up here, making it easier for me to get a nice curve or a nice straight sewed edge. So it just opens it up in that corner. So just right in the corner here, where the corner comes, where it comes to a corner here, that's where I made that snip. And that way there, I can sew that and keep my seam allowance. So I'm going to sew down the side edge using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Don't forget, if you've got your stitch length at a longer length because of all the top stitching and basting and everything, to put it back to your stitch length that you like to use when you stitch a bag together. And don't forget to back stitch at start and stop. Stitch all the way along. And make sure that everything is staying lined up as you're sewing along. And I'm sewing with my gusset panel facing up. And I'm going to stop just shy of the bottom here, just so that I can then turn this and move this out of the way. So I stopped just a little bit away from the bottom edge, probably the same amount as the seam allowance is where I stopped. And that's just to make sure that I can come back over here and start sewing in this corner. And again, just shy of the corner, but still keeping within the seam allowance. And the way Toby has this, you should not be sewing over any interfacing at all. The interfacing is all completely out of all the seams. So a back stitch, and then I break my stitches and I come back. And this is just a personal preference for me. I just find this easier. If you have a way that you find easier to sew sharp corners, definitely go ahead and use that method that you prefer. But you want to sew all the way around the entire bag. All right, so trim any threads. So all my threads are trimmed. So as you can see, I've got it attached. And like I said, when I stopped in those corners, that just helped me get a nice corner here and it made it easier. So instead of turning the corner and pivoting, I just back stitch at each corner and then come back and back stitch again, stitch all the way, come back, break the stitches. And that just helps me get this really nice corner. That's just how I find it's easiest for me. So now we're going to repeat that with the second panel. So line up your center marks, clip it in place all the way along, line up the top edges and that seam, make sure your webbing is all aligned, that's very important. Because you see how mine lines up here, it looks like it's gone all the way around. That's sort of what you want to do. You want to give that illusion that it continues on. If it's off by a little bit, no one's going to really notice. So now I'm going to make that snip again in that corner just to really help me get that corner open so that I can sew there just within the seam allowance. And again, I'm sewing with my gusset up. And using the seam allowance given in the pattern, and I'm just sewing along. Don't be afraid to squish the bag down here a bit because it'll be in your way a little bit. Don't be afraid to do that. So stopping, moving the gusset out of the way. So I'm just going to reach into the bag. And again, the way I'm doing it, I just find it helps me get nicer corners. Move the gusset out of the way. And then sew the other corner up to the top. Cut all your little threads. And there we have it. That is how your bag is looking so far with it all attached. It's pretty much done. We just now need to attach our binding and our little decorative belt, or sorry, scarf panel. So that's how it's looking. So we're going to put this to the side because now we need to move on to our binding. Now we need to grab our binding panel, and on the binding panels, they'll look like this, and we need to make some marks. So you'll make a mark from the short edge, so from this short edge, and you'll make a mark, and it might be a little bit hard to see. You'll see if this one seems to be a bit darker, I think. So you'll make a mark from this short edge down using the measurement given in the pattern, and you'll do that on all the short edges of both the panels. Then you'll make a line down the center long edge using the measurement given in the pattern. And once you have that done on both, then we need to fold the short edges in. So using some double-sided tape to hold it in place, we'll fold the short edges in. So you'll fold them to meet that line. So take one short edge, fold it to meet the line that you made on the short edge, just like that. So it's folded down to meet that line. And on the other edge, oops. Then we're going to take the long edge, just one long edge, and fold it in to meet that center line that we drew. So I'm using double-sided tape here to help hold it in place. Remove the paper backing, and then just fold this over. This double-sided tape really likes sticking to my nails. So you're just folding this in to meet that line, just like that. So it's all folded in to meet that line. Now, if you want, you can trim this corner down a bit just so that you don't have that bulk there. You can trim it just a little bit. Just on an angle like that. Not too close to the corner though, to the edge, because you don't want it to have a raw edge, but just over a bit from the corner and trim it down. Just going to make sure my camera is still focused. Sometimes when I go a bit close on the camera, it unfocuses. So that's how that looks. Now you need to take this, your completed bag, and I'm going to do the second one off camera. I don't feel you need to sit and watch me do that. So I'm going to do one whole side on camera, and then I'm going to go off camera and complete the second side so that you're not sitting here watching me do all this all on camera. So now we need to take this binding panel, and we need to align the raw edge with the raw edge of the bag. So starting at the top, align those raw edges just like that. Pin it all the way down. And I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to align this raw edge here. So the top edges and the raw edges are aligned. So the side raw edges of the bag, I'm aligning it. And I'm starting on the side where the main panel is, not the gusset side. You can start on the, actually, you know what? I will do it so that I start on the gusset side, because when we fold this over later, that's the top stitching you're going to see, because what we do is we attach it this way, then we fold this over, and this is where the final top stitching is, and I can see my top stitching better on that side. So I'll start with it on the gusset side, personal preference. My hands are not cooperating. There. When you come around that corner, just bring it around the corner. Again, line up your top edges. And if you want, you could use double-sided tape here to help really hold this in place. So once we get this all clipped, we're going to sew around this whole bag using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So you're going to start at the top, come all the way down, and I'm going to do the same thing I did when I attached the panels. I'm going to stop here, back stitch, break my stitches, then come over here and continue sewing. And I'll do that on each corner so that I can get a nice seam allowance. So again, using the seam allowance given in the pattern, starting at the top, make sure you back stitch at start and stop. I should have put my extension table on. I'm going to grab my extension table. That'll help hold up my bag so it's not wanting to fall down. There we go. That'll hold the bag because what's happening is it was falling down. This just means I have to fiddle with it a bit more and try and get it to stay up. So I'm at that corner. So now I'm going to move my gusset out of the way so I don't sew it. This thread doesn't want to go where I'm trying to make it go. There we go. Again, back stitching at start and stop. And it kind of went off a little bit there, so I'm going to restart. Now, if you're finding that this is a bit bulky for your machine, what you can do is switch to a bigger needle, try a walking foot, and also sometimes a humper jumper helps you get over some of the bulk where you're finding there might be bulk. This magnetic snap is really tight. It's so different putting binding on the exterior of a bag compared to in the lining. Trim all your threads. Now that that is attached, you need to fold this edge over and bring it to cover the other side. So bring it over and it'll cover over the other side. Now you can use some double-sided tape here to hold this in place. And sometimes I do just to really make sure it stays in place because I don't want it shifting on me even though I'm going to have it clipped. I always find that sometimes even with the clips it shifts, but I want to keep it looking nice and smooth all the way around. What was that noise? Oh, I think it was just the snap. All the way around. So I'm going to use some double-sided tape here. And this is just to help hold it in place for me while I sew. I'm still going to use some clips. However, the double-sided tape will really help hold it in place. Because if a clip comes off and the binding shifts on me, then it won't be as neat and straight as I'd like it to be. Now in our corners, we're going to press the corners the way Toby shows in the pattern. And if you're quilting a quilter, you might recognize how the corner is going to be pushed, kind of like a mitered corner. So I'm removing one paper backing at a time. I'm going to bring this up and I'm just going to fold this over the edge and it should cover that previous stitching. And just bring it over to the other side, press it in place. Make sure it stays straight too, just so that you have a nice binding. So I'm going to focus on the corners when I'm done. So now I'm going to come around and put this on the bottom. And I'm using a clip up here to really help hold the top edge there for me while I'm pushing this all down. And see how it looks so far? Nice and straight and smooth. And your corners, so now with your corners, you can choose if you want the corner to go like how mine are, or if you want it to go this way. So towards the bottom or up towards the top. But you want to pinch it so that they go on an angle in the corner. So you can make it so that it goes right into the corner. So you just keep flattening it so that the corner, or moving it so that the corners come and they meet. So if you look, I don't know if that's easy to see, this corner here where the fold is meets the corner where the other edge of my binding is. So I'm just moving it so that it meets where the other edge, so it gives a really nice sharp corner. Now I'm going to sew this using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And it might be a bit tricky because now I've got to go on this side if I want to make sure I'm keeping an accurate seam allowance. So this is really thick and bulky here. You can hear my machine really pushing through because of all the bulk. Now you can switch to a slightly longer stitch length too. That also helps get through the bulk because it's not having to take so many stitches in one area. And I did skip a bunch of stitches there, so I've got to go back and unpick those. Oops, shouldn't have did that. So I got to go back. So I'm just going to pause it because what happened was my needle wasn't going all the way through. So I do need to switch to a bigger needle. So I'm going to go up to from a 90-14 to a 116. So I'm going to change my needle so I can really get through all this bulk here. And then we'll come back and we will continue on with making our bag. So I've changed my needle and I decided while I was off camera, I would sew that first side and then show you again on how to sew this second side, just so that I don't have to stop the camera to go off and do this. We can go right into making our scarf panel. So this is all attached now. Now I'm going to sew down these edges. So in order to do that, I'm going to start at the top. And again, I've got a bigger needle on, but you may need to hand crank over some of your bulk, and if you do, that's okay. It's not a bad thing. Oops, for some reason my needle or my presser foot just let go there. So don't forget to backstitch at start and stop. It's very important to lock those stitches in. And if you have to hand crank, go ahead and hand crank. Another thing that'll help is tightening your presser foot tension. That helps because what that does is it really compresses the fabric tight so that the needle can get through without skipping any stitches. And again, if you have to hand crank, go ahead and hand crank through the bulky areas if needed. Sometimes our machines just need a little bit of extra help. And when you're coming up to this corner here, just make sure everything is nice and flat and out of the way underneath your needle here so that you don't stitch through anything that we don't need to stitch through. So that means shifting the fabric underneath the needle. So lift up your presser foot and just move your fabrics out of the way. And I'm just going right down. And in this corner, I'm going to take one extra stitch just to lock those stitches in here in that corner so that I don't get angled stitches, because I really don't want them here. And then I'm moving my fabrics again out of the way underneath here so that I'm only stitching through the main panel and my binding. And my binding kind of goes a little bit crooked here, so I'm just going to shift it. And the double-sided tape is good because it helps hold everything in place for you while you're stitching, because sometimes, like I said before, I find even with clips, they'll come off and then the binding will shift on me. So I'm coming up to this corner again. I'm going to make sure my fabrics are not in the way. Take one stitch, and that just locks in that corner so I don't get a skip stitch there. And then I'm moving my fabric again out of the way, so I'm just sewing through the main panel and the binding. So this is the area where you may get some skip stitches if it's really, because it's really thick, not if it's really thick, because it's really thick. So that's where you may need to adjust your presser, adjust your, or hand crank, sorry. And having that presser foot tension adjusted will also help too, because it, like I said, it'll compress the fabrics. Alrighty. So that's how it looks when you've got it all stitched on. And like I said, I like stitching where I can see the main panel because I can get nice and close and get a really beautiful seam allowance, and I don't have to worry about if I'm a little bit wobbly, it'll be on the sides or the bottom. You won't see it as much, but that's how it looks on the bottom of your bag. So you end up with these nice corners at the bottom of the bag. My vinyl is squished. As you can see, it's all squished around. I'll have to repress that to make that gusset lay nice and flat after. But that's our bag so far. It's really pretty. I really like it. So now we're going to make our scarf panel. And I don't need, ow, that hurt. I don't need that anymore, so I'm going to put that out of the way. So to make our scarf panel, you take the piece that you cut, and we need to fold it in half. And I've already made some markings on this. I made these before I had started the tutorial. So what you're going to do is fold it in half, right sides together, and pin it in place. Just making sure my microphone's still on. So fold it together, right sides together, and pin it in place. And you want to pin it down the entire length of the panel. Now I'm going to switch my thread really quick too, because I'm using a black thread, a brown thread I mean, and I want it to be a black thread for this so it matches so you don't see my stitching. So I'm just clipping it. There, that went away. That one escaped. I'm just clipping it so everything is together, lined up, all the way along this long edge. And this is another thing you can do to add to any of your other bags now that you'll learn how to do this. You can add this to some of your other bags just for some extra decoration, some extra pizzazz. So I'm just going to switch my thread really quick. So I've changed my thread. Now we're ready to start making our scarf panel. But before we sew it, what we need to do is make a mark from the bottom short edge here over. So you want to make that mark. I made it on the folded edge and on the raw edge, but what we're going to do is start sewing at the folded edge, go down on an angle until we meet that mark that we made. Then we'll continue sewing all the way along. We'll get to almost the middle. We'll back stitch, break our stitches, leave a gap for turning this, start again, and then come all the way back around until we get to the other end where that mark is. So you can see my mark there. And then we're going to go again on an angle up towards the folded edge. So starting in the corner, I'm going on an angle till I meet that till I meet the raw edge, right up to that line I made. And then I'm going to continue sewing all the way down. And I'm going to leave an opening. And it doesn't matter if it's not exactly centered, but I'm going to leave that opening. So I've moved over. Just keep sewing all the way along. Now I'm getting back to where that line is that I made, and I'm going to stop with my needle down. And if you're worried about an angled stitch, which is going to be angled anyways when we move, you can take that one stitch in the corner, pivot your fabric, and then stitch right up to the folded edge into the corner. Now we need to trim these corners off here because you don't want them. You don't want that bulk there. And I'm going to trim even the little corner too. So the corner up the top, just like you would do for turning things right sides out to get rid of the bulk in the corner. So now we're going to turn this all right sides out through that opening we left. I just have to find where it is. It's right here. So we're going to turn this right sides out. And to do that, I just reach in and keep grabbing it and pulling it out. It's not a thick material. It's just quilting cotton, so with no interfacing or anything on it. So it should be really easy to turn. Once I get it all turned right sides out, what I'm going to do is take my turning tool and poke out those corners so I get nice corners. Keep punching my machine. So keep pulling that right sides out. All the way to the end. You could use turning tools to help turn this. I'm just too lazy to go grab all my turning tools. All right, so I've got that all the way pulled through. Now I'm going to grab my turning tool here. That's going to help me poke out my corners, just so I get nice corners on my scarf. And then I'm going to take this to my iron and I'm going to press it really flat, just so that I get a really nice scarf and really nice angles here on the ends. And I'm also going to press under that seam here where we left the opening, and I couldn't find it for a second there. I'm going to press under that seam as well. So I'm going to do that. So which means we're going to end up just top stitching along the along the edges just to make sure we close that seam. So I'm going to give this a press and I'll be right back. Now we're going to top stitch so we can get that opening closed. So I'm going to top stitch all the way around my scarf panel. And you can just top stitch the one long edge, but I'm just going to go all the way around just because I like the way top stitching looks. Just need to take one more stitch into this corner. Now I'm going to cut my threads, and again, you don't have to do the top stitching all the way around. I just like how it looks, and it helps close up that hole all at the same time. Now we need to tie this onto our handle, and this is where it's going to be a little bit difficult to explain, but what you're going to do is you're going to wrap the scarf panel around the handle as shown in the pattern. So you're going to come around the handle here, and you want this hanging down a little bit, and then you're going to just wrap it around the handle. So just like that. Just keep wrapping it around, going up the handle a little bit. And you want to try and make this so that it's nice and flat around the handle too. And see how my scarf is going around the handle, and it goes into the center of the bag. So I'm going up about halfway up the handle. It's hard to see when I'm trying to show you on camera. So now I'm going to come back down the handle. So you've got to angle this to come back down. Just doesn't want to stay up. Maybe I'm just trying to be too much of a perfectionist. And then we're going to tie the bow, or tie a knot. Hang on, I just want to see if I'm doing this right. I did too much. Hang on. So I'm going to undo it a little bit because I've wrapped too much. I need some more down here. This is the first time I've done anything like this, so I'm learning too. All right, so we'll go so that it's like that. That looks more like what Toby has in her diagram. Go up the handle, come back down the handle, come around, I'm just trying to smooth this out. So come around, and you can see they're going to be the same length, and that's what you want. You want your two straps to be the same length or close to the same length. So then you're going to pull one through to the other to make it tied. Just like that. So tie it through, kind of like a little knot. And check to make sure that your little angles here are going the same way. So pull it through, and then we'll make a bow. Just trying to get my bow nice. You can play with it till you get those the same length, which I probably will. I'll go off camera and I'll play with this until I get this the same length, just because it'll drive me nuts if one's longer than the other. So as you can see, I'm trying to fix it now because it drives me a bit bananas. There, they're the same length there. Let's see if I got it this time. I did, and I'm just trying to tighten it. There we go, got it. So now it looks really pretty. My bow doesn't sit quite straight up, but I can adjust that later. And you know what, as you use it and carry the bag, the bow will probably shift around anyways. But, oops. You can make the bow loops as big or as small as you want. The choice is yours. This is your bag. Make it how you really want it. And if you don't like the scarf and the little bow on here, you don't have to add it. You can omit that too. You can, you know, just leave it as is. You can even add a tassel or something instead hanging off your strap. But that's how it looks once you get the bow on and wrapped up around the handle. And isn't it just so pretty? I love it. It's such an elegant looking little bag with this little bow. It just adds that little extra touch to it, making it really pretty. So there it is. Your Dior book tote inspired bag is complete. It's ready to take out and show it off to the world. But before you do, don't forget to take lots of pictures and share it on social media, including in the Facebook page. And also use the hashtags that are given in the pattern so we can easily find your bags. I hope you enjoyed sewing along with me and maybe picked up a few tips and tricks along the way. Thank you for sewing with me. Have a wonderful day. Bye and happy sewing.